He's not home yet, but come in. I just put a fresh pot on. Her voice floated through the half-open door, warm and unhurried, like it belonged to a different time. I hesitated on the porch, the strap of my backpack slipping from my shoulder as I tried to make sense of what I was walking into. I was here for group study with Caleb, who clearly was not here, but instead, I found myself face to face with his mother, Alyssa. I'd only seen her in passing before. A quick hello in the background of video calls or a wave from the kitchen when I came by to grab something Caleb forgot. But standing there now, in a cream-colored sweater that hugged her arms and a loose braid over one shoulder, she looked like she'd just stepped out of a rainy novel. "It's all right," I said, adjusting my tone to match hers. "I can come back later." Nonsense. She stepped aside with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "He's always late. You might as well enjoy some coffee while you wait." Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and old wood, faint traces of polish, maybe a lingering whiff of vanilla from a candle burned earlier. The place was quiet, not silent, but full of that kind of soft quiet that lives in well-loved spaces. Plants trailed from hanging pots in the kitchen window. Books sat stacked on the coffee table, spines softened with time. There was a bowl of fresh lemons on the counter, next to a ceramic mug that read, "Still learning." She moved with ease, graceful but deliberate. No rush, as if time bent differently around her. I followed her into the kitchen, feeling the awkward weight of my bag, unsure if I should sit, speak, or just melt into the floor. "Cream? Sugar?" she asked, pouring 2 mugs with practiced. "Hands, just cream," I said, then added, "Thanks, this is really kind of you." She handed me the mug, fingers brushing mine just briefly. Not enough to be intentional, but enough to be noticed. She smiled again, this time softer. "It's no trouble." I was about to sit down anyway. We settled at the small table by the window. Rain threatened behind the glass, graying the sky. Her sleeves were pushed up, revealing pale wrists and a faded bracelet that looked handmade. She didn't fidget or fill the silence. She let it live between us, like she was comfortable in it. I tried to match her calm, though I could feel a nervous energy humming beneath my skin. "You're in Caleb's literature class?" she asked after a moment. "Yeah. Professor Myers. We've got that group project due next week." She nodded, sipping her coffee, her gaze following the raindrops streaking the window. "He always hated group work. Said people slow him down." I laughed quietly. Still says that. The smallest laugh escaped her, more breath than sound. "Some things don't change." Her eyes flicked back to me. They were the kind of blue that looked gray in cloudy light. Thoughtful, tired in a way that felt lived in rather than worn out. There was a stillness to her that made everything else, the rain, the ticking clock, even my own heartbeat, feel louder. "I hope you don't mind," I said, gesturing to the mug. "This is really good coffee." I grinned. "The beans myself," she said, "one of my few indulgences." "I think I get it now." She smiled at that, a full smile this time, not polite, not reserved, real. It changed her face in a way I hadn't expected, like a curtain lifting. For a second, I saw the younger version of her, maybe the one Caleb grew up with, but also the woman who had learned to live alone, who didn't rely on anyone showing up on time. "How old are you?" she asked, as if catching herself mid-thought. 24. She nodded slowly, like she was lining that up against something unspoken. "That's a good age. Strange, but good." "What do you mean?" "You're still figuring out who you are, but now you're starting to realize you're allowed to choose." She paused. "Not everyone realizes that in time." We sat there like that for a while, talking, Not deeply, not deliberately. Just two people sharing a table, letting words surface when they wanted to. Her voice carried a kind of softness I wasn't used to. No performative warmth, no forced politeness. Just present. Real. I hadn't meant to stay that long. The coffee had cooled by the time my phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. Just got home, got stuck at Tyler's. Rain's a mess. Rain check? I looked up from the screen. She was watching me, already guessing. He's not coming, is he? I shook my head, chuckling. No. Group study postponed. Well, she said, standing to take the mugs. At least you got better coffee than you would have at his place. I stood too, slinging my bag back over my shoulder. Definitely. Thanks again, really. She walked me to the door. The rain had started now, steady and soft. I hesitated on the porch, not because of the weather, but because something about leaving felt too abrupt. Like we hadn't finished the conversation we didn't even know we were having. Just as I turned to step into the rain, she said, almost too softly to hear, "You can come by even if he's not here, if you ever want." Quiet, and I did hear, every word. I told myself I was just returning a book. Caleb had left it in my backpack after one of our classes, a paperback with dog-eared pages and his name scribbled inside the cover. I could have given it to him the next day, or the day after. But instead, I found myself back on that familiar porch, heart tapping faster than it should have. The house looked exactly the same, quiet, dignified, like it held its breath even between visitors. Alyssa opened the door before I could knock, a light sweater hanging loosely off one shoulder and gardening gloves in her hand. "Oh," she said, tilting her head slightly. "You again?" "I'm just returning this." I held up the book, like it was a passport. Caleb left it in my bag. Her smile was small, but it reached her eyes this time. "Well, he's not here, as usual, but you are." She stepped aside. "Coffee's on, or iced tea if you've matured." I grinned. Still very much immature, I'm afraid. The kitchen smelled like lemon balm and earth. A tray of cut herbs lay on the counter. I followed her gaze through the window, where potted flowers lined the garden wall. One of them had tipped in the wind. "I was replanting," she said, slipping off her gloves. "But the wind has other ideas." "I could help," I offered before thinking. "If you want." She looked at me for a second too long. Not suspicious. More like she was trying to read what I wasn't saying. Then, finally, she nodded. Out back, the world smelled of soil and summer rain. I righted the fallen pot while she knelt beside a cluster of sage, gently teasing the roots apart. "You ever grow anything?" she asked without looking up. "Just a cactus in college. I forgot to water it. Somehow it still died." She chuckled under her breath. Cactus are needy in their own way. We worked like that for a while, quiet, unhurried. She'd ask me what I was studying, how my finals were going. I asked her about the flowers. When we paused for water, I realized we'd been out there for nearly an hour. "You don't talk like your age," she said as we sat under the awning, brushing dirt from her knees. "What does that mean? You ask questions. You listen." "I was raised well," I teased. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "No, I think you were just left alone enough to notice things." The breeze picked up. I watched her as she tied her braid back tighter, strands of chestnut catching the sun. There was something in her that felt paused, like a woman caught mid-sentence, unsure if anyone was still listening. "Caleb doesn't come home much," she said eventually, almost absently. "Which is fine. He's his own person now. He should be." I didn't respond, not with words. But I think she heard what I didn't say. The next time I came by, It was to help her fix a stuck window in the living room. I'd made some excuse about having tools in my car. She greeted me like I was expected. Not surprised, not overly warm. Just present, as always. We ended up talking about everything and nothing while I pried at the swollen wood. Her ex-husband's name came up once, only briefly. She didn't say much, just that he had moved to Vermont and remarried a woman who liked jazz and hated silence. I liked silence, she said, tugging gently at the window frame beside me. That was probably the problem. You ever think about starting over? I asked. She looked down at her hands. I think I already did. I just haven't figured out what it looks like yet. It became a kind of rhythm after that. Me showing up with one excuse or another, her letting me in without asking why. Some afternoons we'd garden. Some evenings we'd talk while her cinnamon bread baked. Once, I brought over an old lamp I didn't need just so I could help her fix a light bulb. She laughed at that one. Not at the lamp, but at the way I was pretending. You're very subtle, she said. Am I? No. But it's sweet. And then there was that rainy afternoon. Clouds had rolled in fast, and she was scrambling to bring in the hanging plants before the downpour hit. I showed up just as the sky cracked open. Perfect timing, she called over her shoulder, soaked, hair sticking to her neck. Hope you brought your cape. We rushed the last of the pots in, arms full of dripping greens, slipping on the tiles as we collapsed against the door. The rain pounded the roof above us, and for a second, neither of us moved. She was laughing, breathless, water beating along her cheekbones. And then, quiet. We both reached for the same fern pot on the floor. Our hands touched, just fingertips, cold and damp. But we froze there, looking at each other. And something passed between us. Not loud, not spoken. Just real. She was the first to look away. She stood, brushing her hands on her jeans. I should go put on the kettle, she said, her voice soft again. We drank coffee in silence. Her sweater clung to her arms. I couldn't stop watching the way her lips pressed around the rim of the mug, the way her eyes stayed on the window but didn't see it. Before I left that day, standing by the door again, the same spot where it started, I said it. I think I came for more than coffee. Her eyes flicked to mine. No surprise, no scandal. Just a long, quiet look. Like she'd been waiting for me to know it. She smiled, just barely. Almost sadly. I know. The rain had been threatening all afternoon, hanging heavy in the sky like a promise no one asked for. I'd come by to return a Tupperware dish she'd packed with banana bread last week. But really, I think we both knew I didn't need a reason anymore. Alyssa barely even looked surprised when she opened the door. You might want to stay a bit, she said, glancing up at the darkening sky. Storm's coming. I wouldn't mind, I said, a little too quickly. She raised a brow, but said nothing, just turned and walked back toward the kitchen, the sway of her braid brushing against the soft fabric of her cardigan. By the time we were chopping vegetables for something she called storm stew, the first crack of thunder rolled across the sky like a low growl. Then, without much ceremony, the lights flickered once and went out. We both froze. The kitchen stilled. Well, she said, setting down the knife. So much for the microwave. She moved around the house like she'd done it 100 times, pulling candles from drawers, lighting each one with calm precision. The flame lit her face in pockets of gold, throwing soft shadows across her cheekbones. I stood there with the stew pot still in my hands, completely caught in the moment, in her. Come on, she said, nodding toward the gas stove. It still works. We're not entirely helpless. We cooked by candlelight, laughing over flickering flames. She handed me ingredients, barked soft instructions, told me when to stir, when not to peek, when to trust it. I could have stayed in that warmth forever. The hum of her voice, the scent of garlic and rosemary, the thunder outside like a distant drumbeat. When we sat down to eat, she poured 2 glasses of red wine she'd uncorked, just in case of emergency. I think the wine was more ceremony than comfort, something to hold while the world outside cracked open. I used to love storms, she said after a while, her voice quieter. When I was a girl, I'd sit on the porch with my dad and count the seconds between lightning and thunder. It felt like magic then. What changed? She sipped her wine and looked down at the table. I married someone who hated silence, especially the kind storms bring. He'd fill it with noise, arguments, the TV, himself. Over time, I stopped noticing the rain. I didn't interrupt. I just listened, steady and open. He used to tell me I wasn't ambitious enough, that staying home with Caleb meant I was wasting my mind. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I stopped writing. Did you know that? I used to write. Poems, essays, things that would probably embarrass me now. You don't seem like someone who embarrasses easily. She smiled faintly. No, but I forgot how to want things for myself for a long time. It's strange, isn't it? How easy it is to disappear inside someone else's life. That last line sat between us for a moment, heavy and still. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. I know what that feels like, I said. Not in the same way. But I've been living everyone else's plan. My dad wants me in finance. My friends think I'm some confident guy with direction, and I just keep performing, smiling, being the guy who's always fine. She looked at me like she saw straight through it. Not judging, just understanding. It's exhausting, pretending not to be lost, I added, and my voice cracked a little more than I meant it to. She reached across the table then, slow and unsure, and laid her fingers over mine, not gripping, just touching. Her skin was warm and dry, her thumb gently brushing against my knuckle. I didn't move. I couldn't have if I tried. I looked up, and our eyes met, steady, searching, silent. I didn't lean in to claim her. I didn't rush it. I just moved, slowly, as if afraid to break something fragile. And she didn't stop me. When our lips met, it wasn't urgent. It wasn't loud. It was soft and hesitant, like a question neither of us wanted to answer yet. Her breath caught, just barely. My hand cupped her cheek, thumb resting against the curve of her jaw. We kissed once, then again, a little longer. And then we stopped. She pulled back first, her eyes still closed, and then slowly opened them to look at me. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. We sat like that for a while, our hands still touching across the candlelit table, the scent of stew. Long forgotten, eventually she stood, and I followed her to the living room, where we collapsed onto the couch, like 2 people who had walked a long, long road to get there. She tucked her legs under her, leaned against me without asking. Her head found my shoulder like it belonged, there, and we just sat like that, the room dim with candlelight, the rain tapping gently against the windows, the thunder softened by distance. No words, no explanations, just the storm, and us, and the quiet space between. We never called it anything. No confessions, no labels, just soft rhythms. Him and me, woven into moments that slipped quietly into routine. I'd come over some afternoons with coffee from the place down the street she used to like, and she'd act unimpressed but always drink it anyway. Sometimes we cooked. Sometimes I helped her repot something or change a light bulb she could have easily done herself. Sometimes we sat on the porch and didn't speak at all, and those silences were some of my favorite conversations. I noticed how her eyes softened more when I laughed, how her shoulders relaxed when I sat beside her without a word. I started, leaving books on her shelf, jackets on the back of her dining chair. She never asked me to take them home. She never asked anything, really. It was like we both agreed to not disturb the quiet magic of almost, but even magic has a breaking point. One overcast Tuesday, she didn't open the door the first time I knocked. When she finally did, her face held a different kind of quiet. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice too light to be casual. That's never a good sign, and I knew it before she said another word. "I'm afraid," she admitted, stepping back so I could come inside. "Not of you. Just of this." We stood in the kitchen, the same one we'd stood in so many times before, surrounded by the ghosts of shared mornings and candlelit evenings. She glanced around like she could still feel those echoes too. "This house has already seen me start over once," she whispered. "And I don't know if I can survive pretending again. Pretending none of it meant anything after you're gone." I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words didn't come. Not in that moment. So I just nodded, held her gaze, and left. Quietly, gently. The door clicked behind me like the end of a sentence I didn't want to finish. The next day, I came back. No text, no warning. Just me, and a small paint can in my hand. She opened the door and looked at it first, then me. "You once said you hated the kitchen color," I said. "Figured it was time we changed it." She stared at the can, then at me. And something in her, something guarded and scared and lovely, gave in. We moved the furniture, covered the counter, cracked open the window for air. The first stroke of pale blue went up the wall, erasing years of faded yellow. She painted with small, careful movements. I painted like someone who knew he was painting, more than just a wall. She caught me smiling once, and I shrugged. "It's not just paint," I said. "It's a promise." She didn't say anything to that, but she didn't need to. By the time the walls had dried and the light shifted golden across the room, we were sitting on the floor, paint specks on her cheek and on my shirt. She leaned back against the newly colored wall, barefoot and quiet. "I don't know where I'll be in 5 years," I said. My voice shook just slightly, but I didn't pull back. "I don't have a plan, or a 5-year vision board, but I know who I want beside me while I figure it out." Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. Instead, she crawled forward slowly, reached out, and cupped my face like I was something fragile she had finally decided to hold on to. Then she kissed me. No hesitation, no question, just fullness. Not the first kiss of discovery, but the kind of kiss that comes when a wall finally collapses, when both people stop pretending. We didn't say anything after. We just sat there, forehead to forehead, the scent of new paint still fresh around us. The air between us finally cleared, of all the what-ifs. The next morning, I made coffee. She was already on the porch, wrapped in that cardigan I'd come to know so well, her legs tucked beneath her. I stepped out with 2 mugs and handed one to her. She took it with a smile that felt like spring, finally arriving. The flowers she'd planted weeks ago had bloomed, shy little faces peeking over ceramic pots. The sun warmed the wood beneath our feet. The breeze carried the scent of rosemary and paint. I sat beside her. She rested her hand on the table, palm open. I slid mine over hers. No fanfare, no announcement, just presence. "Sometimes," I said, watching the steam curl between us, "a cup of coffee isn't just coffee." She turned to me. "Sometimes," I said again, "it's the beginning of everything."